What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? Who would have thought? Not me. Cowboys, Bucs. I don't know if it's game of the year. That had to be one of the more entertaining second halves I've watched in a long time. The physicality, the playmaking, Baker. That was awesome. The Cowboys win 4 of 5 games. Mike McCarthy heating up. Cooper Rush making plays, throwing bombs to CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, their secondary, Lewis, Bland, shout out Fresno State, seals the game with that crazy forced fumble. Jordan Lewis, obviously, the insane interception. What a game! I thought that was riveting television. You could tell Collinsworth, who's a happy, optimistic, loves football. He was even blown away by what we just witnessed. That was really fun. So we'll dive into that, and we'll hit on a couple other topics from today. I talk with Colin like I do every Sunday, so I let a couple things kind of just settle, and I want to hit on a couple things that we didn't, and something I want to expand on as well. So we will dive into some other football talk. Obviously, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. It's a big week. We'll have a podcast out on Tuesday, and then the plan will be, I think, probably react to the Christmas games as long as Netflix can stream, unlike that Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight that I know at my house we had a lot of trouble with. So hopefully things go smooth. We'll do one there, and then probably nothing for a couple days, and just enjoy the family time. Try to be with our loved ones, and not wring each other's neck. But before we dive into some football, listen, I'm not a great gift giver. I'm not good at it at all. I'm not an outside the box thinker. I struggle. Kids are relatively easy, especially little kids. But for older family members, if you want to do something nice for, maybe your dad, a loved one, significant other, a brother, a sister that you want to take care of, what is better than under the tree? Like, hey, here are 2 tickets to, you name it, whatever they want to go to, a game, a concert. Take care of them in 2025. The official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time, is the best. Been using them for a long time. Make someone's week. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. That was awesome. That was fantastic football. And for anyone, and I'm included in this, that sometimes gets nostalgic about the day and age, which, listen, I don't want anyone to get CTE or have a shitty life that played in the NFL when they're 50, 60, 70 years old, or any of that. But there was something special about watching people just get destroyed and knowing, like, I can't imagine playing this game at that level. And then, like any young kid, if you play high school football, you realize how you get nervous the first day you ever put on pads, like when you're on JV, and you get to varsity football and you start hitting some guys that are going Division One. Maybe some people listen to this. If you played Division One, let alone in the NFL, there's something about the physicality of the sport that brings out kind of your manhood and separates the boys from the men. And there was something special about that game that I just witnessed. People were getting destroyed. That felt like a game that I would have watched, on my parents' 30-inch TV in 1996, where you just watch guys, every other hit get absolutely ran over. And every other big hit, you're like, is that guy going to get up? Is that guy okay? Sometimes defenders, hurt themselves on the hits. And the level of play and effort in that game, I just thought was awesome. And I'll be honest, like when I saw, looking at the schedule like I do, getting ready for the podcast, either at the start of the morning or as the week's going on, you're like, this is a Sunday night game. Not that I thought like the Bucs were just going to roll and the Cowboys were playing well, but it's like, I don't know if this game's going to be that great. I thought that was honestly one of the more entertaining games, of the year. Starting with the Cowboys. I don't know what Collinsworth and Tirico said because I had the TV on mute. We're getting ready to leave tomorrow back home, so we are talking about some stuff. Had the game on, but had to mute it, and then they showed the visual. This is as the Cowboys. When I finished with Coward and I went out to the living room, it was 10-0 Cowboys. And then I get out there and Cooper Rush is continuing just to throw bombs. It's like they look fantastic. I'm like, they can't look any better. And then they show, which they always show Jerry on a Cowboys game, especially in Dallas. And you got Steven, and I think that was his other brother, one of the other Jones family sitting next to him, and they're just wearing Jerry out. And I don't think it's hard to put two and two together if you're guessing on what they were talking about, like how good Mike is doing, or what are we going to do in this situation with him coaching this well? Because at 82 years old, and Jerry mentioned this, and I think we all thought he was crazy, and partly because he is kind of crazy and he talks a lot, and it's hard to ever know how much what he says, there's substance behind it. They said we're going all in, and then clearly it didn't feel like they were going all in. But when he said what on his radio show that Mike could get extended, Mike could be the coach here next year. Most of us just assumed, and I was guilty of this, like Mike McCarthy's done, especially when Dak goes out for the year. When Dak goes out for the year with the hamstring injury, and you see him every game sitting in sitting in the box, you go, wait, listen, Cooper Rush, their defense had been putrid the first half of the season. Like this team's screwed. How are they going to win games? And then Cooper Rush and the offense has looked pretty good. Like Cooper Rush has made a lot of plays. And especially tonight in that first half when he is just throwing bombs to CeeDee Lamb. And those two guys were eviscerating the Tampa Bay secondary. Like, I don't know, Jerry. I mean, I don't know what else you could ask from a coach in this situation. One big difference on defense, and I was thinking about this watching the game. Even if you don't have great defensive personnel on your front four, depending on if you run a 3-4, 4-4-3, when you have a special pass rusher or just a special player on your front that takes all the energy of an offensive coordinator, the offensive line, and the blocking scheme, it takes so much energy to focus on that guy that it's kind of like a domino effect for the other guys get to play better than sometimes they actually are because of the guy they're playing next to. And on the Saturday game with Chris Jones, they talked about it with him. He's like, I'm not having my best statistical year, but I feel like I'm playing my best football. And everyone next to me is eating. And you see it with all the great players, whether it's Myles Garrett, when Nick Bosa's playing well, obviously TJ Watt. Even if you have other good players, they play even better because all the energy goes to you. And their defense, since Micah has come back, just looks dramatically faster up front. Obviously, he's a big part of that as a great pass rusher, but the other guys were flying around and crushing Baker early in that game. And since he's come back, they just look a lot better on defense. And tonight, the secondary, Al Harris, who I'm pretty sure is the guy when Matt Hasselbeck in the playoff game against the Packers, when they won the coin toss and Hasselbeck goes, "We want the ball and we're going to score." Pretty sure that's the guy that he threw the pick six to. And clearly that's the connection with McCarthy, and he's the DB coach. That defensive backfield, obviously Bland's back from his injury last year, made a game-winning play. The play Lewis made on the interception, but their physicality, their hitting, Diggs is out for the season with a knee injury. Look like Ronnie Lott meets Cam Chancellor back there. So if you're Jerry and you're Steven and you're trying to figure out what to do, you look around the landscape, you go, Mike's really good with offense and quarterbacks. Like, it's not really debatable. Dak's played his best football with him calling plays. And then tonight, Cooper Rush is 26 of 35 for basically 300 yards. Now, he could have thrown a pick there late in the game, got pretty lucky. The dude dropped it. But overall, to have a backup quarterback look that competent is a reflection of the coaching staff and is a reflection of just overall coaching in general. So I think that visual showed. I would be stunned, honestly, if they weren't talking about that. Like, this is going pretty well. What are we going to do? Go on a interview? Who are we going to hire that's going to be better than the situation we're in? Plus, the reason that we struggled this year was more of a personnel issue than coaching. Now, is McCarthy perfect? Of course not. But I've been pretty impressed this last month because I think universally, Cowboy fans, just football fans, would have said 6, 7 games ago, they are completely screwed. Like this thing could just fall off and become derailed. You look around the NFL, you look at some of these teams that are dealing with injuries, they just don't look. The Niners, good example. I mean, the Giants are the worst case scenario. It's like, what is going on there? This team is the opposite. It's like, damn, they are playing, they are a muff punt screw up by the dude that they elevated from the practice squad from winning 5 straight games. And currently they would be, instead of 7-8, they would be 8-7. And they would be right in position. They're like, God, could they make a playoff run? Could they, do they have an opportunity to get in? So I think that I, I've been blown away. I mean, the defense clearly under Zimmer with Micah back has become much better. And I think McCarthy has just done a really, really good job. That's as hard of an effort, just in terms of like hard of lost my train of thought there. Just in terms of guys playing start to finish in a game, as I remember in a while from a team that, I mean, the season's over. They're not going like, what are we doing? We Sunday night football, lights are on, and we approach that game like it was win or get into the playoffs. So that was awesome. That really was. Right down to the final play when Bland stripped that ball away from Irving. So congrats to the Cowboys because it would have been pretty easy to wave the white flag. And I think this is a separating factor in the NFL that so many teams, the Panthers are a good example, and we'll dive into them. Like every team worth their salt battles their ass off till the bitter end. Whether you're going to win 4 games, whether you're going to win 9 games, whether you're trying to get the number one overall seed. It's what truly makes the sport special. And partly because if you don't give full effort in this sport at that level, you will get injured. You will get hurt. And just fantastic win by the Cowboys. I actually think it was a pretty impressive effort by the Buccaneers as well. One thing that at this point in time we just have to acknowledge, Baker Mayfield's a top 10 quarterback. Baker Mayfield is a big time player now. And you look at that 2018 draft, obviously Lamar Jackson's won multiple MVPs and became one of the best players, I mean, in the history of the league as an all around quarterback running and passing. Josh Allen might be the most talented player we've ever seen at the position. Those guys are everything you could possibly dream of as first round picks in franchise quarterbacks. This is 2018. Obviously, Josh Rosen's long gone out of the league. Sam Darnold's career was crazy. Not only is he having a career year, he is leading the Minnesota Vikings to the opportunity to get the number one seed and is going to end up throwing for somewhere between 35 and 38 touchdowns. Baker Mayfield, we didn't know if last year was, I don't know, I don't want to say a 1 year wonder, but like, could it get that much better? I just looked. Only Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow have more touchdown passes than him. And clearly, since, I think he's talked about it, he lost a little weight. He moves early on in his career. He reminded me of Johnny Manziel, that he thought like what he could do in college. And Johnny was much more of a runner, but Baker scrambled around a lot at Oklahoma as a playmaker. It's like, you got to be really careful. The random defensive lineman will run your ass down. And I remember it might have been Johnny's first start or one of his first games. They were playing the Panthers, and he thought it was like, playing some team in college, and it was Luke Kuechly, and he thought he could outrun him to the corner, and Luke Kuechly caught him like he was a lion on the Serengeti in like 3 steps. Like, Johnny, this is a different world. And that used to happen to Baker a lot. He looks dramatically faster. I don't know if it's his confidence, but his running ability is a legit weapon. And then as a passer, like he's always had an explosive arm. He just now is just a really good player, right? I mean, deep balls, intermediate balls, playmaking, obviously running. And listen, they now have the same record as the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons hold the tiebreaker. But do you think Michael Penix, who I thought looked pretty good today, it's one thing playing at home against the worst team in the NFL. I mean, there is no one more gutless and just who looks shittier right now than the Dayball-led New York Giants. Like they are currently, in terms of the effort and execution and just overall production they play with, an embarrassment to the NFL. I mean, it's really, really bad. But listen, I can't. It was your first start. Like I thought, regardless of the statistics, he looked solid. Going on the road to Washington, coming off one of their biggest wins. I mean, it's got to be like a top five win for the Commanders in the last decade. Now, I know a large portion of it was against their backup quarterback, but still, Jayden throwing 5 touchdowns against Fangio and that defense, a lot of momentum. That place is going to be going fucking bananas. It's going to be a tough spot for Penix. And like coaching advantage, I'm going Commanders over the Raheem Morris led operation. And I'm a Michael Penix guy. I just think it's going to be challenging. They could easily lose that game. I haven't seen the line yet. They're going to be an underdog in that game. So they control their own destiny. But I think they lose that game, and the Bucs are still very much alive playing the Panthers, which is no easy out the way they're playing, and the Saints both at home. So I think if they win those 2 games, they're still in the playoffs, and that'd be back-to-back playoffs for this guy that replaced Tom Brady. And listen, like I think the Bucs are solid. It's hard to overcome. They've had a bunch of injuries. Obviously, losing Godwin a long time ago. They're playing with some randoms. It's basically they feel a little like the Cowboys. It's like if you can just somehow neutralize Mike Evans, you can at least slow them down. But Baker's throwing fucking balls to. I was like, who's this tight end? What's this guy's name? And I was just really, really impressed. And that play, Vita Vea made to stop Ferguson from a first down at the end of the game to force a punt and give the Bucs an opportunity was just fantastic. I mean, what a special player. And was there anybody that once the Bucs got the ball back that didn't believe that Baker at minimum was going to get them in field goal range? Honestly, I thought he was going to lead them down to score a touchdown. And not because the Cowboys defense was playing bad, just because I had that much belief in Baker Mayfield. But you look back at the 2018 draft, Allen and Lamar like Hall of Famers. What Baker and Darnold, which is kind of ironic just because a couple years ago their careers were in shambles playing together. Right? They traded for Darnold on the Panthers, then a year later they trade for Baker, and it was like this is a disaster. And both those guys left that place, and now look at them. It's just awesome. As a football fan, I loved watching Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. I would say over the last decade plus, he's easily one of my favorite college players to watch. And I remember battling with Coward who didn't like him coming out because there were a lot of, immaturity questions about him. But I was like, I don't know, man. I think he's so good he will overcome it. And clearly some maturity stuff. I think his life changed, and I think they've kind of alluded to it and even talked about it. Once he got married, had a child, he feels like a different human being. And if you look at Jason Kelsey, when Jason Kelsey became a star player, and he's definitely talked about this, his career was not going that well. There were rumors that he might get traded right around 2016. Met his wife, started having kids. Look when Jason Kelsey started making Pro Bowls in all pro teams. And he never looked back. And I feel like whatever happened, once Baker got to Tampa, his life calmed down. He's become a top 10 quarterback. And honestly, he has moments where it's like, that's a top 5 quarterback on some of these drives. Avoiding players, hitting guys, getting hit and still making the throw. He's not just a fun player to watch. Like, he's a really, really good player. And I think Tampa, that situation last year of just, they kind of took a flyer on him. And he earned it. And this year, he's doubled down. Because he was good last year. He's way better this year. And now they got to win the next 2 games and be the biggest Commander fan Sunday night, which I think, listen, if Atlanta wins that game, they deserve to go to the playoffs. And I think if Atlanta loses that game, what they'll be asking themselves, would we have won this division if we would have started Cousins a month or, bench Cousins a month ago? And my answer is yes. And Colin and I talked about this briefly, but you guys know I did not like the sequence of events. Because having been with with a team and knowing the way the buildup is, you have if you're a good GM, you really, really know the draft pool after the combine, who you like, who you don't like. Now, when you're a good team, like if you're Andy Reid and Veach, you don't have a great idea after the combine, like who's gonna be where, but you got a pretty good idea. The group of 12 to 13 guys that are going to be top 10 picks. But you don't have a great idea when you're drafting 31st or 32nd who's going to be there when you pick. But when you leave the combine, if you are decent at your job, you have a really good idea who you like in the top 10 if you have a top 10 pick and who you would want. And when the combine ended, most people knew for a fact, like Michael Penix was available in the top 10. Like you didn't have to trade up to get him. If you were drafting eighth, he 1000% was going to be there. So for them to do the Cousins move and then do the Penix thing, they did not know they liked Penix when they signed Cousins at that level. Because if they had, they would not have signed Cousins and they just would have drafted Penix and done what the Bucs did last year. Signed a guy like Baker for $5 million bucks. Sign Sam Darnold for or Gardner Minshew and have that guy be Penix's backup. Why? Because Penix is a 24-year-old ready-made pro prospect. Doesn't mean he was going to be good, but he was not a guy that needed to sit. And I heard Schrager mention it this week that he wasn't getting any reps in practice. Of course not, because the starter gets them all. So when you're the backup, you just service the scout team defense. So the Atlanta Falcons, if they do miss the playoffs and the Bucs win these last two games and they lose to the Washington Commanders, that's on the front office because you can't convince me that they would not have been better off with Penix playing this whole time. I don't believe it. His arm's much more lively. He's way bigger threat to throw the ball downfield. He's just a better player today. There is not one coach or GM in the NFL for the next 3 games that would take Kirk Cousins over Michael Penix. And that was the case 5 weeks ago. So I think the Bucs got a little lucky because they've had a million injuries. This year has been hard. Baker's played out of his ass, obviously, throwing all these touchdowns and keeping them in games that, like, even tonight, like they were getting outplayed, and he just kind of willed them to that game. But because the Atlanta Falcons stuck with Cousins for so long, that will be a big reason if this plays out the way that I think it will play out. But just a fantastic game tonight. That was awesome. It's the most wonderful time of year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, and we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. When you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Want to hit on a couple other things. You know, when you're a young player and you get thrown into the fire and you struggle, it's natural. Most guys aren't Micah Parsons or Justin Jefferson that just hit the ground running and become instant stars. Even a lot of guys, and whoever your favorite team is that drafts like a guard or a linebacker or something in the 3rd or 4th round, and he's just an immediate starter and he's just solid. Like that's an anomaly. Most guys kind of come in and out, right? If they play wide receiver, tight end, linebacker, DB, kind of mix in, have some good plays, have some bad plays, maybe kind of get benched, go back to special teams. It's a work in progress. The sport's really, really difficult. Physically, mentally, the length of the season, the different schemes that you've never seen in college. It's hard. It's why everyone that was like, Caleb Williams and the Bears are going to be awesome. I'm like, do you guys not realize how difficult this is? So it's why what Jayden did today was mind-blowing. But he played 5 years and 5-year starter. Like, he has a lot of reps. Bo Nick, same thing. Like, these guys have a abnormal amount of reps for being rookie quarterbacks. Bryce Young looked really, really bad. I think we gave him somewhat of a pass last year because the franchise was so bad, right? And rightfully so. It's like, listen, I'm giving him a little pass. Just like the Bears. I'm giving them a little pass. We'll see who they hire, and we'll hold them to a different standard next year. Then this year started, and it felt like he was even worse. It was like, this is crazy. I liked him out of college. It was hard not to. You watched him play at Alabama. But then you watch him in the pros his second year, you're like, he looks so small. His arm looks terrible. He's inaccurate. You can't function. Like this is not going to work. And he got benched, rightfully so. And let's face it, whenever you get benched in the pros at quarterback, especially a high pick, it's a really, really big story. It was a huge story when Anthony Richardson got benched. I mean, it's a big deal. And Anthony Richardson came back. He kind of looks the same. Inaccurate, throws some bad picks, can run, but it's just like same thing. Bryce Young comes back. He's a completely different human. If you just box score scouted him, it will not tell you how dramatically. Now, the bar was really low, but against the Eagles, you watch him today, like he's a real player. He makes real plays. They couldn't get a first down with him. He couldn't throw a wheel route. He was completely lost. And maybe it was just simple as he needed to take a step back. He needed to take a deep breath. I don't know what he did. And if you're a Panther fan, maybe you've read articles about this. Maybe he's talked about this. I don't know if he went to therapy. I don't know if he just got away from football. I don't know if he just was completely humbled. It doesn't seem like it's not like he was cocky about it. So I don't know if he needed humility, uh, but it worked. And today he made some awesome, awesome plays with his legs run around. He ran over a defender, threw a couple touchdowns. Chuba Hubbard went nuts. And listen, the Cardinals aren't that good, but like we talked about with the Cowboys, this season for the Panthers, once they kind of benched him and came back to him, it's like, whatever. This team's just going to lose every week. Because when he was playing, it felt like they were one of the worst teams we'd ever seen. It's like, this doesn't get any worse. And since he's come back, like they're a real NFL team. They could beat anyone. That's I'm giving the Bucs a win. That's going to be a very difficult game. They just benefit from the games in Tampa, and it's obviously must win for them. But that's going to be hard the way they're playing. So Bryce, I can't tell you how much respect I have respect for anyone who just goes through a really really shitty moment in life. And most of the moments that we go through aren't, depending on your industry or personal life, it's not a public thing. Now, your friends and family may know about it and people in your coworkers, but it's a pretty isolated thing. It feels like a big deal. But at that level, to be that public, to be the number one pick, it had to probably feel pretty lonely. And there had to be times where he looked in the mirror and go, do I suck? Can I play in the NFL? And to find a way to be mentally tough enough to battle through it and come back and play like he's played, uh, like that's you don't play for Saban and excel for Saban if you're not a mentally tough motherfucker. And clearly, listen, he doesn't have elite talent. He doesn't throw the ball like Baker. He doesn't run it like Kyler. But he can be an NFL quarterback. And as crazy as that sounds for a guy that was drafted number one pick like Middlekauff, I hope so. 2 months ago, no one could say that. No one could say that. You couldn't watch him play and think like, yeah, this guy could be a starter. And now you watch him, you go like, this guy could be a starter. Now, how good at what level? Like, I'm not going to go there yet. Got a long way to go, but he can be a starter in the NFL for a team that clearly competes every week, and they should have a big offseason because they should have money and high draft picks. So, congratulations to Bryce Young for just battling his ass off. Uh, what else do I want to hit on? The Eagles, I don't want to say lost the game because Jalen got concussed, but Kenny Pickett, I tweeted this out. I will tell my children one day about the stretch of quarterback inflation that we had, that guys like Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett got drafted in the top 20. I do believe that Mac Jones going 15th is one of the craziest draft picks of my entire life. For example, Trey Lance going 3. It's like Middlekauff. That was an all-time bust. We have seen guys be dramatic busts with physical skills that are big, that are athletic, that can throw. Get it. But guys with Mac Jones and Kenny Pickett's skill set, the majority of at least my life and the history of the NFL, those guys go in like the fourth through seventh round. And because the quarterback inflation got so out of whack because of guys like Mahomes and Josh Allen, that everyone was reaching for quarterbacks. And we learned a valuable lesson. You can't do that. Like the Eagles, what they get them for? Sixth or seventh round pick? Like they paid the proper price. But I think the Jalen Hurts situation today shows you how fast shit can change. Because especially so many of these quarterbacks, like look at all the good teams. Jared Goff's probably the one guy who doesn't run, but Jordan Love moves. Obviously, Jayden Daniels moves. Jalen Hurts moves. You just go through the quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield moves. That Sam Darnold moves, and obviously the AFC guys all scramble around. That forever it was like you could get hurt, but you were going to get hurt in the pocket. Now, because these guys are scrambling around, either sliding or diving, they just open themselves up for an injury. And we're coming down the home stretch. And before we knew it was a concussion, which in a weird way, I think everyone's relieved because you're like, what happened to Jalen? He's like worried something serious, and he's still got to pass concussion protocol or whatever to go back. But obviously, that's way better than some high ankle sprain or a broken collarbone or whatever the you know list of injuries could be. Can change like that. It really can, and that's the thing about this sport that guys get injured, position players get injured. When your quarterback get injured, your entire heart drops. And you see Kenny Pickett, like if Kenny Pickett had to play a lot in a playoff game, the Eagles have, you could argue, the best roster top to bottom. You would bet against them because, I mean, he's a backup for a reason, but he's also just a very flawed player. And in these bigger moments, one thing, like he could beat the Giants or whatever, but you play him in a playoff game against the Vikings, against the Packers, against the Lions, where he had to score a bunch of points, it would be a major, major problem. So I think it just, sometimes I forget. You just think it's just going to go on, especially Mahomes. He gets injured, he comes right back. You just realize today how fast things can change it. And no one knows that better than the Eagles that experienced that in 2017 when Carson Wentz, all of a sudden, he just tears ACL and he's just out. Now, that was the best case scenario. Big Dick Nick came in and led him to a Super Bowl. But I think we all know most of the time, that is not the way it plays out. Picture this. You're in the garage, your favorite room in the house. You're tuning up your engine with parts you found on eBay. Every piece is just locking perfectly into place. You step back to admire your work, hands covered in grease. And because you're committed to driving that thing further than the odometer can even handle, you start thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably also use some new brakes, some shocks, and struts. This baby deserves a new air filter. So where do you go next? Back to eBay. You can find anything there. It's unreal. Wipers, headlights, even cold air intakes. It's all there. And you've got an eBay guaranteed fit. You order a part, and if it doesn't fit, send it back. Simple as that. Look, DIY fixes can be major. Doesn't matter if it's just maintenance or a major mod. You got it, especially when things are guaranteed to fit. So when you dive into your next car project, start with eBay. All the parts you need at prices you'll love. Guaranteed to fit every time. eBay, things people love. Last but not least, I can't get over how bad of a loss that was for the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan's protege was Mike McDaniel. He started working for him in the late 2000s with the Houston Texans. The stories are all out there. He had a drinking problem. Gary Kubiak actually fired him, and then they brought him back to Washington. He went with him to Cleveland. He went with him to Atlanta. Obviously, he played a huge part in San Francisco and went on to help Kyle Shanahan build up the 49ers and then got the Miami job. And this year's been a disaster. Like, there's been talks in Miami about them firing Mike McDaniel, partly because their owner's a loon, but just because, like, what is going on? This team just looks shitty. Then the Niners go on the road and lose to him. It's hard to put into words how terrible the 49ers season has been. Today they had 9 penalties for 90 yards on basic things like guys not lining up, on the line of scrimmage, guys being offsides on defense, like just pretty basic shit where Kyle, obviously field goals continuing to miss because their field goal kicker is an erratic guy. Their defense is a shell of itself. If you told me the 49ers were going to miss the playoffs, I guess I could have seen it at the beginning of the year. It's the NFL. Weird shit happens. I don't know if I could have envisioned it going like this. Last week, they scored 6 points at home against the Rams. This week, they have 10 points the majority of the game. They can't score against the Miami Dolphins in a game where Debo and Kittle are going nuts. And the Purdy thing is throws a pick to end the game, essentially. And there's talks about 50. The money per year, I hate that because you can manipulate any contract in the NFL. Clearly, when you're talking a quarterback contract, though, that they're talking about with Purdy, you're talking 170 to $200 million. And I just don't know how these last two games, the games have ended on his interceptions. And last week they'd tell you, well, Jawan Jennings got bumped. Why are we throwing double move passes to Jawan Jennings with the game on the line? How does that make any sense? Today, there's not a soul in sight. He hits the Miami Dolphins guy right in the hands as he's getting destroyed. This is a business, and you can make mistakes financially on most contracts because most of them aren't that detrimental big picture because they're not even a $50 million guarantee. It's like it's over in a year and a half. When you guarantee 170, $200 million, that is like a 3-year window. I was looking the other day, I think, at Trevor Lawrence's. Like, they are in bed with Trevor Lawrence for the next 3 seasons. The contract starts next year, really kick it in. That was the big thing with Russell Wilson's. It was like, it really kicks in now. So I think when you invest in these contracts, just because the market's the market, I have a hard time with that logic. Like, yeah, if you want a big-time quarterback, it costs $200 million. Well, the guy better be a big-time quarterback. If you just want to pay, like, we like the guy, but the market's the market, then that's on you. I never have a problem seeing these high-end elite guys getting a ton of money. CeeDee Lamb, every time I watch him, like, yeah, I would have paid him too. Justin Jefferson's like, Jesus, he's like Randy Moss 2.0. TJ Watt, like, shit, underpaid. And then you see these quarterbacks, you go, yeah, Lamar, Josh. I mean, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jason Light does cartwheels every day down the hallway knowing that he got Baker Mayfield for $100 million. To think that you would pay Brock Purdy based on what we're seeing this year, again, I'm not acting like you cut the guy, but he still has another year. $200 million. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. And listen, if Kyle is adamant about it, someone needs to step in. And I'm not pro front office people, owners meddling, but there has to be some common sense. And sometimes, you're kind of too close to the sun to kind of see everything. And that's how it feels like with Kyle. If he truly is dead set on like, yeah, Brock's our guy, I'll give him the market value. That's just, it's one thing. Everyone's going to make a mistake. A draft pick, a free agent signing, it's football, it happens. When you sign a quarterback to these huge deals, you clearly have all this information. Like the Atlanta Falcons knew Kirk Cousins was coming off an Achilles. They knew Kirk Cousins, I think, had won one career playoff game. Like they had that. He was 36, 37 years old. Like they had that information. But when you sign your own guy, like the Miami Dolphins did, McDaniel spent every day for 2 years around the guy. Like they knew what they were getting. He'd already showed them. The Packers kind of rare situation where it's like, yeah, we're just kind of betting on the come. But they had still spent 4 years around the guy. The 49ers, now he's been the starter for 3 years. They've seen the good, but they're really starting to see the bad. And when you pay a guy, look at the Chiefs. You just don't have as many options, right? Because that money impacts your cap in a lot of ways when you're just paying these huge salaries. And once that starts happening, even as the salary cap goes up, it's harder to build a good team. So I think there has to be some deep breaths taken. Like this is a fluid conversation. And as of right now, I'd be in play it out mode. We got another year. You're making a lot of money off the field. We like you, but here's the Baker Mayfield contract. Is he a better player than Baker Mayfield right now? Is he? I mean, I'm watching Baker Mayfield for $100 million about to throw probably 40 touchdowns on the season. like, well, Baker Mayfield has no, his team's been injured all year long. I mean, injuries left and right. Mike Evans missed half the season. Godwin's leg got pointed the other way. They didn't find out Bucky Irvin was sweet till like halfway through the season. They have a new offensive coordinator. Make $100 million total. That was his contract. $33 million a year. I don't know, man. I'm just not one of these. The market's the market. That feels like, yeah, the market's the market if I got a sweet Hall of Fame quarterback. If I don't, then we got to have real conversations, because if we want to win here, we can't win maxing you out. The Dolphins are never going to win with Tua on that contract. Not going to happen. They got no shot. So I'll get out of here on that. I just that pick, that'd be seared in my mind if I was the guy either writing the check, John Lynch, people just in the 49ers front office. Like, can we just take a deep breath on this one?